Welcome to our POOIA Professional Organization of Iranian Americans monthly lecture series. First and foremost, I would like to extend my profound appreciation and gratitude to our distinguished speaker, Dr. Houman Banaei, proud son of our friend, Mr. Lili Musai, who has accepted our invitation despite his busy schedule. I owe heartfelt gratitude to our eminent scholar, Dr. Modaresi, who has introduced this scholar to me. For those who do not know POOIA, I will briefly introduce POOIA, which was established by a group of eminent engineers and scholars in 2012. I have had the honor of being a part of POOIA since 2017. POOIA is an affiliate of Qanun and subsequently a non-religious, non-political, and purely an independent organization which has no affiliation with any other organization. POOIA holds monthly lectures by scholars in different sciences in addition to humanities and cultural topics glorifying our country, Iran. All the POOIA lectures are in English so that American and international professionals and young Iranian Americans who unfortunately do not know Farsi be able to participate. In addition to this, every year POOIA has an annual gala giving awards to some brilliant Iranian students from different fields from different universities. Our next gala will be on January 24, 2026, and our keynote speaker will be Dr. Maziar Zafari, professor of medicine and a cardiologist. POOIA works, number one, to create a sense of synergy within population of Iranian Americans. Number two, to enhance and ensure the growth and professional success of our young people by recognizing their accomplishments. Number three, to provide other forms of advice such as internship, career, counseling, financial support in a few cases, etc., to support our young professionals. Number four, to support the Persian classes at Georgia Tech to give not only Iranian Americans, but also other students to have an opportunity to learn Farsi. And number five, to promote a positive image and counter the negative media depiction of Iran and Iranian people via our Persian classes and our cultural lectures. You can retrieve their videos on pcc.com. In short, POOIA is about all of us together as a professional and diverse community with a mission to help our communities and manifest the right image of our proud identity, our glorious culture, and our monumental achievements through our monthly lectures, annual gala, other programs with these goals and aspirations in mind. حال به معرفی کوتاهی از استاد و دکتر هومن بنایی میکنم. Dr. Houman Banaei. Dr. Houman Banaei was born in Tehran. He did his elementary and high school education in Tehran, received his BS in physics from Tabriz University and MS in photonics optical engineering from Shahid Beheshti University. Then he moved to the United States and received his second MS in photonics from the University of Central Florida, and his PhD was in electrical engineering with focus on optical engineering. Dr. Banaei is the founder and CEO of Everex and the inventor of its core manufacturing process for producing ultra-thin optical filters that are currently enhancing performance in a multitude of industries, from wearable health monitoring devices and cancer detection surgical tools to robotic sensors and satellites. He holds 38 patents and has co-authored several scientific publications in high-profile journals, including journal Nature. Dr. Banaei founded Everex in 2015 to commercialize his products using process that he developed with a humble beginning in his storage shed. He has experienced the full entrepreneurship spectrum from the humble beginning to profitable manufacturing and the challenges in between that typically collapse a vast majority of hardware startups. Tonight, Dr. Banaei will be talking about what makes entrepreneurs who survive the roller coaster journey. On behalf of POOIA and Kanun, I express my deepest appreciation and we are all ears.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity, and it's quite humbling to be presenting to this group of seasoned people. As a disclaimer up front, what I'm about to present here is really just sharing my story, and the slides that I've prepared. These are slides that I had prepared for, a couple of college presentations, really sharing my entrepreneurial journey and hopefully inspiring some of my fellow students, to embark on this entrepreneurial journey, if you will. So I apologize up front if there's a lot of basic information that many of you have probably experienced firsthand. So there's definitely a lot more experience in the room than I have. So it's quite humbling to be here. Give me just 1 second to share my screen and make sure you can also. All right. And I also, I was told
It's
to.
not on slideshow yet. Okay. Yeah.
I was also told to keep this non-technical. So it is non-technical for a very short period of time. I'll just tell you a little more about my business and what it does, uh, just as a way to make sense of the rest of the conversation. But for the most part, this is going to be more of a storytelling and more of sharing my view of entrepreneurship and the first-hand story of the journey that I've personally gone through, and really just to spark a conversation, hopefully later tonight, about what it really takes to survive this roller coaster journey. So, disclaimer: this is not going to be a commercial for my business. This is more about the story. I realize that the audience here is probably not my customers anyway, so I have no motivation of promoting my business here, but I would love to brainstorm about the journey of entrepreneurship. So first, I will share a little bit about myself and my company. Then I will share some of my views about entrepreneurship. And then I will share my first-hand story about the journey that I've gone through. And the choice of this slide was intentional because as I'm sure many of you have experienced firsthand, to do something like this, to be an entrepreneur, start a new company, and make something novel happen, you really have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and you really have to leave that comfort zone before anything magical can happen. So, and I'm happy to share some of those examples of my journey with you. So, disclaimer, everything that I'm presenting here, they're all my own personal opinions. This is not a reflection of my company or, affiliates. And again, I apologize if some of the concepts are too basic. So, let me just tell you a little bit about my company and the technology, just enough so that we can make sense of the rest of the story. All right, so we make something called optical filter. We've all heard about, coffee filters, water filters, air filters, oil filters, all kinds of filters, but optical filter is one of those very rare filters that most people don't know about. So what an optical filter does is that it filters very particular frequencies of light out of, let's just say, the rainbow spectrum of light. And that turns out to have thousands of applications. We may not notice it, but they are in surgical devices, they are in test devices in test labs where, if we give a blood test, it goes into a machine that's using a number of optical filters to analyze the light signature of what's emitted from whatever is going on in our blood. Or when it comes to cancer detection, one very powerful method for cancer detection is by filtering the light emission from cancerous cells so that you can only focus on detecting the very particular signature that you would expect from the cancerous cells. Other examples, our cell phones already have a couple of optical filters in them. Future cell phones will have dozens of optical filters in them. Telecommunication system would not even work without multiple optical filters at every single node in the entire fiber optic network. The self-driving cars, they will be everywhere in the future. And if you're in San Francisco, you will already see them everywhere. They cannot even function if they don't have very high performing optical filters, because they're supposed to suppress all the noise in the background, and they're supposed to see nothing other than the very particular laser signal that comes to their detector. So you have to filter everything, but allow that very particular laser light to go through. So wearable devices, right now, if you look at the back of your smartwatch, you will see probably a green LED. There is no optical filter there. However, in the future, you will find at least a half dozen of optical filters so that your smartwatch can actually detect very advanced, health features, very advanced features for monitoring multiple health signals. And there are companies that are developing skin cancer detectors that will go into a wearable device similar to a smartwatch, so you can monitor the health of your skin with light. Anyhow, so I think that's enough about optical filters, and applications are really all over the place. I mean, we're making satellites better. We're making AR VRs consume less energy. So yeah, it's a good material. It's a good material, but the problem that we're solving with our business is really that the old way of making these filters has been always very expensive, and to the point where these optical filters are roughly about $1,000 per square inch. So imagine a very small square inch of this material, you pay about $1,000 for that. And that's the typical retail price of this material. And the reason for it is that it's a very complex nano-layered material. You often have tens, if not hundreds, of very, very thin nano-layers of materials, and it takes a lot of effort, and it takes very expensive equipment to manufacture that. My thought process was that if that technology, after about 40 years of, 50 years of being around, it has reached a plateau where it's still expensive, it's still not affordable for many applications, incremental improvement on that technology is not going to be the next step. The next step has to be a revolution in how these are manufactured. And that's why I came up with this technology where, essentially we changed the entire manufacturing platform. We borrowed some concepts that are widely used in optical fiber manufacturing, and we brought them into optical filter manufacturing. Imagine if you have a piece of taffy and you just warm it up and you pull it, it thins out. We do the same thing with a very complex configuration, a very complex assembly of very high quality optical layers. We pull them, they become nano layers, and all of a sudden they work as optical filters. Excuse me. So the technology is heavily patented, and lots of patents around use cases and the manufacturing. And we also happen to make these filters significantly more compact than the traditional ones. Therefore, any miniaturization, such as smartwatches or endoscopic probes that are supposed to go into very, very delicate parts of our body, could actually benefit from the fact that we can make this very, very small. As a matter of fact, one of our customers is developing an endoscopic probe to detect ovarian cancer. And that's only possible if you can have a sub-millimeter, very, very tiny imaging probe that can access the points where cancer starts developing. But the traditional probes are actually too big. They can't reach the right points. So there you go. That's one area that we're very proud that we're contributing to. So the whole technology platform has a very large, multi-billion-dollar opportunity, and our strategy as a business is to start small, make a solid, profitable business in certain areas where we know there's an existing market, and then from there keep growing into emerging markets. And now we have good traction, basically in multiple market segments, putting us on track. And now, as a segue to my journey and really the whole topic of entrepreneurship today, I started this company in a storage shed. So it was a humble start, a very tiny 60 square foot storage shed. But now where we are now, we have a really good industrial grade manufacturing facility. It's not super huge, but it's very functional and serving really good customers. And we are in a transition to actually the next phase of our business. So now let's go to the journey and really the whole concept of entrepreneurship here. I graduated with my PhD from Creole, the College of Optics and Photonics, right here in Orlando, Florida. Career choices, typically for vast majority of people, they either become researcher in universities, which is amazing, fully respected, or they become researchers or technologists in commercial companies, or some of them they switch to the business side and they become business developers, they become salespeople. People with my background, they usually end up with one of these three areas. So for me, I took a different approach. I took the entrepreneurship approach. And these days, entrepreneurship is pretty trendy. Lots of people want to be called founders and be entrepreneurs. And I don't know if we have, younger people in the audience who are considering the next step in their career. If we do, I would like to actually encourage them to pay close attention to the rest of this talk. And for those of you who've already gone through this journey, I would love to hear your thoughts once we're done talking. So, yeah, the title of entrepreneurship feels pretty fancy and it feels glamorous. And calling yourself a CEO also sounds pretty fancy. But what most people don't realize is that entrepreneurship is not really about getting a fancy title CEO. You may think that CEO stands for Chief Executive Officer, but it actually turns out that it stands for Chief Everything Officer. The journey is not easy. The journey is not as fancy as it sounds like. This is a point in my roller coaster journey when things were actually going through this, up and down. And at some point, I had nobody, and I had very major potential partners and investors visiting. So I had to get down and do everything, including clean toilets. And to this day, I still do that because I want to keep remembering, and what it took for me to get to here, where we are now, and also set an example for the company that if we're not humble, entrepreneurship is not the right choice. We're going to get punched left and right. We're going to get rejected left and right. And if we're not humble, it just won't work. So this slide just very visually shows an overview of my journey from the point where I started in my storage unit, from some initial wins and some exciting moments to the points where things were going down and the business was on the verge of bankruptcy, and probably most other people would have given up and would have closed shop. to the point of, because of not giving up, we made it to the next, and then we made it to the next, and to the next. And at some point, we thought everything was amazing until COVID hit. And then all of a sudden, it went down again, right? And, you know, a very long journey of what happened and how we survived through all of that. And where we are now, it's actually on the upside, what you see on the right-hand side. I'm blessed to have a really amazing team of very loyal, very hardworking, and like-minded people. And what you see here, I'll elaborate a little more on this a little bit later, was a, a paradigm shift in how I built my team. Prior to that, I didn't know what it takes to survive in a startup environment. At that point, I switched gears and I tried to be very intentional about the team that I built to make sure that the team actually survives and toughs through very difficult times. And it proved to be working. You know, we've had success, we've had failure with team members, but overall the overall concept that I've been following seems to be working so far. So a little bit of I guess academic talk about what it takes to build a business. And again, I apologize. I know that this is very basic, and many of you in the audience, you're masters of this, but I'll just say that for the sake of completeness. So when we go to business schools, they teach us business models, they teach us business plans, and they talk about how important it is to, spell out your value propositions, identify your customer segments, figure out how you want to communicate with them, how you want to deliver your service or products to them, how much money you make, how much money you spend, what partners you need, and really the whole thing about building, an entire business plan, building a business model. This is taught everywhere, and theoretically, a lot of college graduates, they know how to do this, but the part that's often ignored is actually what it takes to be an entrepreneur that can execute through this and survive. I don't know the exact statistics recently, but I know that in general, more than 95, 98% of startup companies fail within the first few years. And a lot of it has to do with perhaps some of what they need to have on the business model side is probably not working. But it also turns out that the number one reason why startups fail is because the founders give up. Um, I guess if I'm not mistaken, statistically, the number one reason is for running out of money, and another one of the top three reasons is for the founders to give up. And that's how I came up with this. That the entrepreneurs, in my opinion, they need to be pretty. And please note that this is misspelled pretty. If it was the actual pretty, it would definitely not apply to me for sure. But it's misspelled. It stands for being passionate, being resilient, being ego-free, having really high tolerance for risk and pain, and frankly, being insane. There are times that almost everyone around you would promote an idea that makes a lot of logical sense. But to be successful and to really make it to the next level, sometimes you have to put all that logic aside and try something insane that no one else has tried. Try something that doesn't make sense to anyone else. And be okay with that, be okay with being called crazy. So just going briefly through this list one more time. Passionate to an extreme level. Really to an extreme level. There are things that we like, there are things that we love, and there are things that we are willing to, go an extra mile for. But really, we need that passion to an extreme degree to survive through some of the really tough ups and downs of a startup environment. Steve Jobs has a famous interview where he talks about how extreme passion is really important for anyone to stay in business in entrepreneurship. Resiliency is very critical because things get pretty tough, and if you get stressed, if you get nervous, if you get sick because you can't tolerate the pain, all of that can lead to failure. And there are times that uh, basically anyone in the right mind would probably just say, all right, this is a signal that this business is not working. But in my personal opinion, I may be wrong, but in my personal opinion, a business is not worth pursuing only under two conditions. One, it turns out that the product or the service, they just don't work. Two, it turns out that nobody cares, even if it works. So if there's no market or the core thing doesn't work, it's just theory. In my opinion, these are the only two reasons for a business to essentially shut down. Outside of that, every challenge, in my opinion, has to be overcome. Every challenge has to be resolved. And a lot of this also comes down to the philosophy of doing business. If we're doing business purely because we're looking for ways of quickly getting rich, then it makes sense. Maybe we should look for anything that delays that process, and we should be very smart about not wasting time in a process that may not be the fastest way to get rich. But in my word, the philosophy of building a business is beyond just getting rich and making money. It's more about putting our talent, putting our gift to use to either produce a product or deliver a service that makes life easier for the rest of humanity. And to that end, sometimes we have to go the difficult route. Sometimes we just can't go through shortcuts. Sometimes we have to accept the fact that the shortest way is not necessarily the best way. So anyhow, and it takes resiliency, really extreme resiliency, to go through some of the moments that, again, if you're just thinking pure financial, if you're thinking pure comfort, it makes logical sense just to pack up and go do something else. Ego free, again, I mentioned, alluded earlier, we get a lot of rejections. I have personally, I can't even count how many rejections I've had. I have raised, I've taken investment from more than 100 investors, and for every yes that I've received, I've probably at least heard about 10 to 20 no's. So I've been rejected probably by a couple of thousand investors before I was able to convince 100 of them. We get rejected by partners, we get rejected by customers, we get feedback. Sometimes we get very harsh feedback that hits at the very core of all the passion that we have for the product. And all of a sudden someone comes out and says, well, sorry, but this is complete waste of time. Don't do it. I've heard that from many, many investors. So we need to set ego aside first to accept feedback, to dust off all the emotions and essentially just get to the core of what that feedback is, set all the emotions aside, and really just take what's useful from that feedback. And tolerance for pain, again, I'll touch on this later too, but running out of money is one example that's not easy. It's very, 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 very painful. And I've experienced that so many times in my journey. And the pain that comes from that moment, again, one response to that pain could be really avoiding the cause of pain altogether. Just pack up and go do something else. Another way to deal with it is to use that as a motivation to do things to make tomorrow a better day. And I think it's very critical because, this can happen very frequently. Every day can have very painful moments. And if we don't have the tolerance for it, we can very easily get exhausted and burned out. All right, so enough on that slide, and now I'll try to go a little bit faster through the next slides. For my personal journey, the resources that I had access to were quite limited. I had access to a little bit of funds from the family. I had some ideas, and I had a good-looking storage shed. And I'd acquired a number of the skills by going through a lot of the schooling and by being very hands-on. And I also had some ideas about what the market was missing in my particular field. So, yeah, from the perspective of the resources for a business, that's what I had. The moment I touched it, I realized that, wow, if this works, this could be a multi-billion-dollar opportunity and it can solve many, many problems in the world. So I had that huge dream and I had that very big idea, but realistically, things have to start small. And that was my starting point. Good old days. Turned my dirty storage shed into a little machine shop. Ordered some benchtop machines. Use those machines to build my own first equipment. And with that first equipment, I did some proof of concept work in that same storage shed. I literally and figuratively cried days and days because I had at least some 6 to 9 months of back-to-back failure. Back-to-back failure. Nothing was working. Until one day, a burnt chunk of plastic came out of the machine, but there was a very particular signal that I saw in that burnt chunk of plastic that proved to me that the idea was starting to work. And I was quite excited. I went around and I showed it to friends and family, and I said, yeah, one day this is going to be on your windshield. One day this is going to be in your medical devices. And people, obviously, for good reasons, they were laughing at me because it was just a burnt chunk of plastic. But, it was a good signal that worked, and, gradually graduated from that stage, went to a slightly larger storage unit. From there, and that little storage unit, actually, it had a chemistry lab, it had a vacuum coating lab, it had a little tiny clean room. It had everything, but in a very humble way. Graduated from that, went to the next level, built a better facility, gathered a team. And but at that point, the team was primarily made of part-time interns from school. And it got to a point where I ran out of personal money. I had no access to borrowing more family money. And the company was not at a point where I could attract investment yet. Or maybe to be more accurate, I should say that I didn't know how to attract investment from investors. So it got to a point where I was out of money. And I had to tell my team that let's stick together and make this work. I'll give you a lot of shares in the company. We'll all get rich together. But next thing that happened was that every single one of them left. Everyone left. No one wanted to work for company equity because they were not chosen, they were not selected to work well for a startup environment. And and also, yeah, they were just interns. All they wanted was to really just get paid so they can go through college. So what happened was that everyone left, and in that large facility, it was me alone. Daytime, talking to potential customers and investors. Nighttime, sitting in that lab with basically doing physical work. So it was fun. And this gentleman was actually one of my inspirations during those times. Um, I'm not saying that I agree with everything that he says or believes, especially these days, uh, but I definitely actually appreciate him because some of his words, some of his interviews were really motivational to me. I got to see during my lowest points where I was entirely out of money and I had to work around the clock to make things work, I got to see that there are other people who've gone through this and they've come out okay. The pain may become very extreme, but it won't kill us. And if you just tough through it, you will come out okay. And I decided to trust that. I just decided to trust the process, that if I just never ever give up and I just stay focused on, fixing mistakes, I make mistakes, quickly learn and get up and run. That would be the way to go. We gradually came out of that first recession, if you will. And this is probably the cheapest trade show demo that at least I've personally seen. I put together with about $50 worth of, aluminum framing. I put together this message, and I had no money. I just printed on 3 pieces of paper this message, and I went to the largest trade show of our industry, where roughly 40 companies are basically making millions of dollars with an optical coating technology. And I went there and I said, no more coating. We're done with coating. Let's do this in a different way. And yeah, I remember for that trade show, I was actually staying at a hostel in Chinatown in San Francisco. But I would dress up in the morning and go to the show as if there's no problem in the world. And yeah, so we showcased our prototypes, and the outcome of that trade show was 70 leads. One of them became our first paying customer. The next one became a large partner and a good investor, a company called Edmond Optics, a very reputable distributor in our field. They used to be called Edmond Scientific. Many people know them under that name. So someone met me, they loved the product, and a few months later, they ended up investing a good 6-figure amount in the company. They committed to launch my products on their website, and there you go. From that point on, we started going upwards. And I also was blessed to find people who were willing to put their money and being happy with contributing to something that's helping the humanity. And I think that's very important. Surrounding ourselves with the right partners is very critical. All right, so the new philosophy for rebuilding the team. Like I said a few minutes ago, I lost my entire team at some point. Everyone left. It was me alone again. But I borrowed this concept from Ernest Shackleton on his expedition and exploration of Antarctica. His ad in the newspaper was literally asking for the craziest men in town. Advertising for a job that you may not come out of it alive, you're not going to get paid. It's going to be super harsh and super cold and dangerous. And at the end of it, the most you may get is probably a recognition for your success. If anybody is in, let's do it together, right? So that became my hiring philosophy. I would officially and intentionally scare everyone that I would interview by presenting the worst case scenario to them, so that if they sign up for this, they're aware that it's not going to be easy. Usually job interviews, they try to showcase all the glamorous things about their companies. They try to show how amazing things are. I would go through that phase, and then I would say, there's a second part to this. It can get extremely hard. It can go upside down. We may have to work around the clock. We may not get paid for a while. Are you still okay with that? So with that hiring method, I was able to, again, surround myself with really good people who signed up for the challenge together. Using the resources that we secured, we started building new machines. If you look at this picture right here, this is a tiny machine that I built in my storage unit. And look where I am. It's a much bigger machine, right? So very industrial level things. And again, yeah, so that's that's really the journey. And I don't want to stretch this too much, but basically that was the point right before COVID pandemic where we thought everything was going well, and all of a sudden a large investor said, sorry, COVID has hit and we're not investing. So, and we were running out of money. What do? We only have less than 1 month worth of runway. Investors just pulled out their offer because they don't know how the markets will react. And what do? So, one idea was to furlough everyone, fire everyone. That's what most companies did. Even rich companies, even companies that are doing completely fine, they did that. Um, but that wasn't actually quite matching with my philosophy, especially when I've hand selected these people and I've made a commitment to them that if we go through the rough times together, we're going to come out very successful and happy together. The worst thing that I can do to them is to get rid of them the moment it gets hard. So I went to the team, we had some conversations, and I said, well, we're not at a point quite yet to be able to really sell a lot of our products to be profitable. We're still more or less in the transition from being an R&D company to selling commercial products. Um, what else can we do? We put our brains together. We said, all right, we have a chemical engineer, we have an electrical engineer, we have an optical engineer, we have this facility, we have a little chemistry lab. So what can we make with this that we can sell right away? Long story short, we landed on an idea for making a tabletop air sanitation device. It had nothing to do with optical technologies. It had nothing to do with optical filters, but it was something that we were able to quickly make and sell a lot of. Within about 4 months of that point, we went from an idea to having sold the first 1,000 units of an air sanitation device because everyone wanted to protect their air around them. So that's how we kept the business going for a while. We generated money. We kept everyone on the team except for one director of finance that constantly preached the idea of firing everyone. And that person kept saying that, that's the only way we can survive. And she just kept saying it to the point where I said, well, I mean, she kept saying that we can fire people so they can take advantage of the unemployment benefits. And because she kept saying that, and it wasn't really in line with my philosophy, she ended up being the only one who ended up taking advantage of that unemployment. So the rest of the team stayed intact, and we made it together. We went through lots of ups and downs. The curve that you see on the bottom here is actually a true representation of our cash flow for a very long period of time. Lots of ups and downs, lots of zeros. If you think about it, when a company, in a typical case, when a company starts running out of money, everyone is scrambling to liquidate the assets and quickly sell off and just close shops. People will start talking, saving that little bit of money that's left to hire their bankruptcy attorney to wrap things up. What we did is that every time cash was going down, we would just double our motivation and say, all right, what can we do to ship a few more products so that we can turn this around and bring a little more cash so we can survive through this? And we kept doing this. And in that process, we kept improving our product. We kept improving our relationship with customers. We kept, finding new ways of making better things. So overall, we went through that very tough journey. We ran out of money probably about 25 times. And because of this type of team that we had built, running out of money was not a reason for us to give up. So we kept going. And there we go now. We're doing pretty well. We've shown profitability, and now we're basically working with household name customers anywhere from the space industry to AR, VR to cell phone industry. And it's all working because we refuse to give up. And that's really my core message here really is that on a day-to-day basis, on a month-by-month basis, the journey may look pretty difficult. The journey, one day goes a little up and we get excited. The next day, things are very tough and we may feel down. But it's important to zoom back out at any given point in time and stay focused on the big picture of what we're looking for at the end. And the overall journey will be pretty rewarding. So that's it. Yeah. So, lots of examples of being overly passionate. Some people call me crazy for my passion. Some people call me crazy for why I don't pack this up and go. They ask me, how much time is enough time before you give up? And I used to tell them that never. I just keep learning and fixing mistakes, and just as long as I'm learning and improving, there is no point in giving up. There is no deadline where I say, if it doesn't work up to this point, then I will give up. As long as the trajectory, as long as the process is working, as long as there is improvement, as long as we're moving in the right direction, there is no reason to give up. All right, so in my humble opinion, there are two choices that people have to make when we want to be entrepreneurs. One is that when we face obstacles, what do we want to do? We want to be this guy that just gets scared and probably just pauses and maybe backs off and doesn't jump across. Or we want to be this guy who takes the risk of just jumping across as hard as you can, because there is a chance that you can make it to the other side. But there's also a chance that you won't make it to the other side. And you will end up basically climbing up a whole mountain to make it back to the other side. And that's the approach that I've taken. And anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur, I encourage them to actually make that clear decision. And if this is not the way they're willing to be, it's probably best not to do it at all. And a second choice that we all have to make for entrepreneurship is that the journey is going to be a very tough roller coaster journey. So you can be Kevin Hart that has been suffering throughout the entire journey, and the whole ride has been pain, and he couldn't wait for the ride to be over. Or you can be Jimmy Fallon, who just decided to have fun with the entire roller coaster ride. And if you take this approach, you will get sick. You'll be stressed. The stress is going to exacerbate the problems that caused the stress in the first place. And now, because you have exacerbated the problem, you have more reasons to be stressed, and that vicious cycle will never end. But if you have fun with it, you can actually turn the stress into motivation. You can turn that into your drive. And at times that we were out of money, you would find me exactly as calm as you find me today. Because I knew that I needed 100% of my focus and I needed 100% of my energy to solve the problems on hand. So I had no time for stress. I had no time to get depressed. Anyhow, thank you so much for your time. Sorry if a lot of this was redundant, and I appreciate your time and the opportunity to share my story.